The 1980s saw some of the best ever big executive saloon cars launched. The sleek Audi 100, the cool BMW E34, and this, the almighty Mercedes W124 that combined everything great about the brand and is still seen as one of its high points. But then Jaguar threw its hat into the ring, the executive market, with the long overdue and much anticipated XJ40. But now, nearly 40 years on from when this was released and over 40 years on from when this came out, which is the better classic? Let's find out. Replacing the Series XJ had occupied many of Jaguar's top brass for years, but by the mid-70s the company was experiencing some turbulent times. John Egan and Norman Dewis had both resigned, and by then the company was under British Leyland control, which of course put a downer on all kinds of progress. Eventually, Project XJ40, as it was codenamed, was restarted in 1977 with a target of a 1983 launch. But such were logistical and financial cuts within BL at the time, even that was pushed back, ultimately, to 1986. And what became the XJ40 was an all-new take on Jaguar's luxury saloon, gone with a classic 60s-derived flowing curves, and in were angles and squares and etch-a-sketch style straight lines. And in many ways, the XJ40 is a very attractive looking car. It's got a nice handsome front end, it's got tight proportions, and that front end is quite imposing when you see it flying towards you on the motorway. But because it used some classic details from the Series XJ, like the wide grille, like so much chrome, like the quad lights on lower spec cars, it didn't really look as up to date as it could. It certainly didn't look nearly as fresh faced as a lot of German rivals like the sleek aerodynamic Audi 100 would, and really within a few short years this classical elegant design was just a bit outdated. Divisive the exterior might have been, but under the skin the XJ40 had plenty to shout about. For a start, gone was the old XK straight 6 and in was the new AJ6 power plant in various forms. It started with a 2.9 litre engine, which was designed to appeal to the kind of middle area of the executive market previously dominated by cars like the BMW 525 and the Mercedes 260 and 280. Then you could also get a 3.6 litre and later a 4 litre model, but whichever one you chose, the AJ6 was a gem. It made more power than the XK, it was smoother, and yet by more modern fuel injection, it also meant it was more economical. It was also soft rubber mounted to make it more refined and to give it a smoother idle, and yet, when you get onto a straight like this, it's smooth and refined, but give it a bootful, and it's quick as well. Really is a gem of a power plant this, and it's small wonder that Jaguar kept using it for almost 20 years. The suspension was refined over the Series XJ as well. For a start, it was now rubber mounted to further counter out any vibrations or any road imperfections being translated through the car. The body shell was stiffer than the Series XJ as well, which made it more refined. And there was firmer damping introduced to tighten up and sharpen up the handling in light of cars like the E34 5 Series and the W124 with its new independent rear suspension. And the result is that when you're cruising along like this, the XJ40 is classic Jaguar. It floats along with aplomb. It's soft, it's refined, and actually if I just stop talking for a minute, it's refined as well. Just soaks up the bumps. Incredible cruiser. But when you fancy it, the XJ40 tackles corners with ease. The steering's a little bit more weighted than the Series XJ, and the body control is a damn sight more impressive. Got the torque of that 6-cylinder on the brakes, and in it goes. It feels level, it feels composed. I wouldn't go so far as to say it feels sporty, but actually it tackles corners with ease and a real grace that the earlier Series XJ just never quite managed with its comical levels of body roll the more you pushed on. This feels a bit tighter, a bit firmer, and a bit more like it's keen to do this sort of thing. But beyond all the cornering stuff, inside this had plenty of traditional Jaguar luxury. You had acres of leather, lashings of wood, lovely chrome trim, soft, comfortable seats, and some space. As is traditional for Jaguars, this still wasn't a roomy car particularly. It is a lovely, opulent, luxurious place to be, the XJ40, but it also had some modern refinements. Of course, you had options like air conditioning, electric sunroof, but beyond that was its all-new digital dashboard, where all the gauges, your battery charge, your oil pressure, temperature, fuel, and any notifications for warning issues were all done through LCD screens with sliding lines and text that popped up. I've had one pop up this morning for bulb failure, actually written on the screen with a symbol to show me that. This was a really modern touch next to rivals from all the Germans who were still broadly using traditional gauges. Unfortunately, while that's quite a quirky touch as a classic today, when it was new, Jaguar's traditionalist customer base didn't really take to it. It was seen as radical and too modern and too techy amidst this more traditional wood and leather cabin. And what's more, the XJ40 used a very early example of multiplex wiring that would become very popular in the late 90s and early 2000s. But because this was such an early version of it, no one really knew how to work on it. Dealers had to keep in specialist diagnostic equipment to work on it, and it would become brittle and it would cause all manner of electrical maladies in a few short years into the car's life. Because let's not forget here, we're not talking about Mercedes-Benz or Toyota putting this complex wiring together, but 1980s British Leyland era Jaguar. So sadly, you did get issues fairly young into the car's life, errant warning lights and gauges dropping out and lights not working properly and so on, that meant what could have been this car's big main selling point turned out to be a major turn-off for a lot of its customers. But it didn't stop the press from loving the XJ40. In fact, they raved about this car. They loved its ride, they loved its handling, they loved its driving experience and its luxury atmosphere. And Jaguar got the pricing right as well. The base 2.9 litre car, the one that was targeted at the mid-level exec, was priced to compete with the Rover 800, and it actually came onto the market cheaper than the Mercedes 260e. So it had plenty going for it then, and being Jaguar, it improved and learned from its mistakes. Over the years, the quality improved. The new 4-litre version was introduced. You later got the V12. There were more improvements to the interior. Gradually, some of these LCD gauges were dropped, going back to more traditional ones, which broadened its appeal amongst the more traditionalist customers. Over the years, as things improved and it got better, the XJ40 arguably became the car it should always have been, and then it really was a credible contender to the Germans. But sadly, as is also the case for many Jaguars, it was too little and too late, because it had failed at the start. It was late to launch and it had stumbled and faltered with these divisive features and its poor build quality, and of course its lack of any variant apart from a thirsty petrol saloon. There was no diesel and no other body style you could buy. So unfortunately, it was hampered by its circumstances, like so many British Leyland cars of this era. But that doesn't mean the XJ40 is not a great car. It's quirky and it's unusual. It's got this fantastic character about it that arguably none of the German rivals do. It's charming and it's unusual, and it's got a real sense of occasion to it, and it goes well and it corners well, and it's supremely comfortable, and it makes you smile on a day like today where you just fancy something to make you feel good. And what's more, it later evolved into the X300, the car that really this car should always have been, and many Jaguar enthusiasts cite as a high point for the XJ model. So the XJ40 could have gone down as an all-time great, a car to really turn the company's fortunes and put Jaguar on a path to success. And ultimately it might have done, were it not for what came out 2 years earlier. By most measures, as we've covered before, the Mercedes W124 could lay claim to being one of, if not the, best saloon car in the world at the time. And when it came time to replace that for the 1980s, Mercedes had a Herculean task on its hands, but it took it on with full willing and all of its might. For a start, there was the design. Bruno Sacco was tasked with penning what became known as the W124, and I think he did a superb job of it. And while he kept staple Mercedes elements like the big broad front grille, the Mercedes emblem, the wraparound rib lights and so on, he just subtly updated it and modernised it to create a sharper, tighter look. This was definitely still a Mercedes, but it looked more of the moment than the by now slightly dated W124. And by being sleeker and more rounded, it was also more aerodynamic than its predecessor, now with an impressive 0.28 drag coefficient, partly helped by some underbody trays that swept the air underneath the car. And being more aerodynamic makes everything better on a car. The 124 was faster than its predecessor, quieter at speed, and more economical. All big plus points when you want to appeal to that crucial executive market. and the interior, like the exterior, was the same but more modern. It still had the staple Mercedes 3-dial layout and the same basic climate controls, but it was more modern. There was a rounded, swooping dashboard. There's new, softer edges to all the switchgear. And while it is more modern and fresher, it all still feels satisfyingly German and well built. The Jaguar, by comparison, even that lovely 35,000 mile example we're driving today, doesn't feel perfect. There's the odd squeak and rattle, and quite frankly there are clangs when you slam the doors, whereas the 124 still feels absolutely hewn from granite, and you get that real solid thud when you shut the doors. This is a quality product, and this fresh interior got more technology as well. There was climate control, there was airbags later offered for the driver and the passenger. You could even get four-wheel drive to make this an all-weather machine for going skiing as well. Again, the same Mercedes formula, but for a more modern age. In the estate version, you even got self-leveling rear suspension, so you could load it up with stuff and the rear end would balance itself out so it wasn't dragging its bum along the floor, whether you put hundreds of kilos of cargo or you were towing something. Again, Mercedes were thinking of all uses and all customers, not just the high-flying executive barreling down the Autobahn at 100. But it could do that as well, thanks to its broad range of engines. Combine the wide range of petrol and diesel engines, and there were over 15 power plants you could have for the W124. Everything from a simple and frugal 2-litre petrol like we've got in this car, right up to various diesels of 4 and 5 and 6-cylinder capacities, and the mighty V8s seen in cars like the Porsche-built 500e. And in their own ways, they were all refined, superbly durable, economical, and more powerful than they've been in the 123, many of which gaining fuel injection over its carburetted predecessor. But even the thirstiest 124 was still more frugal than the Jaguar on account of better high-speed gearing and a more aerodynamic body shell they were in. And that's another thing, the body shells themselves. With the Jaguar, your only option was a 4-door saloon car. But with the 124, you could have it as a 4-door saloon like this one, you could have a 2-door coupe or a convertible, both of which benefited from 100 kilograms of bracing to make them just as stiff as the hardtop cars, or the uber-practical 7-seater estate. And with the option of petrol or diesel, manual or automatic gearboxes, there really was a 124 for all purposes, from the high-flying middle-class family to the executive who had a meeting to get to the person who just wanted something cool and comfortable to cruise in. And indeed, the 124 still does that with aplomb. It's got more taut suspension than the 123, so it has definitely got less body roll, and it benefits from the multi-link rear suspension from the W201, the 190e to most folk. And as a result, this comfortable wafty barge handles well as well. It's got more weighted steering than the 123, even though it uses the same steering box layout. The brakes are firmer and a lot grabbier, even on a low-spec 200 like this one. And when you tackle a winding road at speed, it accounts for itself remarkably well. So well, in fact, the GoPro's just fallen off the back. It does handle incredibly well for such a big, heavy car. Make no mistake, the Jaguar is impressive for such a big, floaty, comfortable barge, but I think, like for like, engine-wise, it wouldn't see which way the 124 went on a twisty road like this. That said, it maybe isn't quite as comfortable as the Jaguar. It's still a fantastically soft, refined cruiser, but the XJ40 feels that much floatier, and that's a Jaguar thing. That's what they did for decades, and that's what makes the XJ such a charming car. But for combining comfort and corners, the Mercedes is the perfect blend. And in many ways, it's the perfect blend full stop, because no matter what you wanted from your executive car, whether you wanted something sporty or relaxed or stylish or practical, economical or fast or discreet or shouty, there was a W124 variant to suit you, and all of them were discreet and stylish and refined and well built and reliable, and showed the world that you were a connoisseur, and that yes, you paid a lot for it, but you got what you paid for. Because even today, 40 years on from when the W124 was introduced, all of its qualities endure, whether it's a mint condition car or a slightly tatty careworn example. You can still see what makes this car so special, and why so many people cite it as one of Mercedes-Benz high points. Mercedes took the best from the W123 and just made everything 10% better, to continue to produce what, in many people's eyes, was the best saloon car in the world. So really, going up against this monster, you have to feel a little bit sorry for Jaguar. Well, that ain't a bad way to spend a day. Two fantastic 80s bred classics here, but the question is, which one should you choose? Really, it comes down to what you want from your car. If you want an everyday classic you can use all year round, put the family in, drive to work and just have a bit more sense of occasion than a modern SUV, it has to be the Merc. It's more practical, more versatile, a lot more theoretically reliable, and you can get petrol or diesels, all kinds of body styles, and generally they are more affordable than the Jaguar with better parts support as well. But if you want an occasional high days and holidays classic that makes you feel special, that you can show off and gives you a real sense of occasion, the XJ40 takes it. This does feel generally more special than the Merc, and when it's working and when it's in good health, it will put a bigger smile on your face. It comes down to what you want really, but the fact of the matter is, you can buy decent usable examples of both of these cars and still have change left over from £10,000. So if you've got the space for both, why not have both? And maybe that's the real conclusion here. There are no losers because everyone's a winner. But why don't you let us know which one you prefer? Comment down below, XJ40 or W124. Make sure to like this video and subscribe for all future Classics World content, and we'll see you very soon. Now, I've got to decide which one I take home. Such a dick. Manual parking sensors brought to you by Lucas Conrad.